Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. What a beautiful song from Eitan and Shlomo Katz, the brothers singing together. The song is called Hine, Behold, from Psalm 121. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. How are you? Are you excited to do a little learning? We've got a great page with some really interesting topics. Let's light up the darkness. Who is with us? Man, it's almost Shabbos. You can taste Shabbos. Fantastic. Evening has descended. It's Thursday night, so it's already Erev Shabbos. We are in a very Shabbos frame of mind. Yehudit from South Carolina, Melissa in Great Neck, James in Indy, Stephen in New Hampshire, a new name, Art Rossi in San Antonio. Welcome, Art. And Julie Christensen saying shalom. Hello, Julie. Ann in Merced, Paula in Chicago, Joyce in Philadelphia, Harold and Loretta in Oregon. Crystal saying Hodesh Tov, Lucy in Minnesota, Nancy in North Carolina. Julie is saying shalom from Texas. Many blessings to all my friends. PK in Colorado, Stephen in Oklahoma. PK says excited to be here with you guys. Wait a minute. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in the house from Georgia. Welcome, everybody. Okay, where are we holding? This is Daf Kuf Yud, page 110. Man, we're almost there. Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, has 121 pages. We are on page 110. We're in chapter 10. We are still discussing, it's 11 pages. We've been discussing the first Mishnah in chapter 10. This relates directly to the Passover Seder. Specifically, we've been talking about the 4 cups of wine, which are required for every Jew at the Passover Seder. No matter how poor you are, the community has to arrange, or you have to arrange, but you gotta have 4 cups of wine on Passover. Now that we know that we have to have 4 cups of wine, we started talking about yesterday a problem that this brings up, because in the world of the sages, in the Jewish community in Bavel, in Babylonia, where there was a lot of concern about demons and evil spirits and sorcery that was part of that community in the Persian Empire. It was something that people were concerned about. And one of the ways that you can endanger yourself in that community is if you drink in zugos, in pairs. In other words, if you drink 2 cups of wine or 4 cups of wine, you endanger yourself, you make yourself vulnerable to attack from these demons or evil spirits, or the attack of witchcraft and sorcery. So how could the sages tell us that we must drink 4 cups? One of the simplest answers to that was, well, on Passover, we have an extra measure of protection, just as we were protected from the angel of death when he went through Egypt with the 10th plague, smiting the firstborn of the Egyptians, and the Jews were protected. That first night of Passover, throughout history, we have this extra measure of protection. However, having brought up this issue of protecting oneself from drinking in pairs, this conversation goes on, and we're actually going to continue with that very same subject today. Yesterday we had a little bit of an introduction to the fact that in the Jerusalem Talmud, almost no discussion of demons or evil spirits. Very little in scripture, almost nothing. But in that, like I said, in that community where the Babylonian Talmud was written, which is actually part of the Persian Empire, much, much bigger concern with demons and witchcraft. And so demonology, it's a study. It's something that is studied within the Talmud. It appears many times. And so we'll hear some of these teachings today. Today, we're going to hear something quite interesting about this subject. And I'll just mention it here at the outset. It's basically where the sages come out on this is we can't ignore it. Because it is a concern, and we'll see why. However, one should not be overly concerned with this subject, because one who is very particular to avoid evil spirits actually makes himself more vulnerable to these evil spirits. So you should take, sensible precautions, but not obsess with this subject. All right, let's get into it. Hold on, let me just arrange my computer a little bit. Okay. All right, here we are. We're on page 110 on the A side, just a few lines from the top. And we said there is concern for the safety of one who drinks in pairs, having 2 cups of wine or 4 cups of wine or 6 cups of wine, only when he intends to set out on the road after drinking. But if he intends to remain in his home, then there is no need for concern. They didn't have cars, they didn't have DUI and drinking and driving concerns back then, but this seems like a very sensible precaution here. If you're going to be at home, it seems like there's less of a concern. But Rabbi Zera said, and one who plans to sleep is comparable to one who is setting out on the road, right? Because when we go to bed at night, a piece of our soul sort of returns to its source. So there's a little bit of a journey involved when we go to bed at night. Also, the Gemara asks, and if one intends to remain in his home, is there really no cause for concern? But Rava would count the beams of his house, meaning that Rava, when he would, let's say host a Shabbos dinner or host a dinner, and he was drinking wine in his house, when he would have his first glass of wine, he would say, okay, I'm on the first beam. And when he would have his second cup of wine, I'm on the second beam. And when he has his third cup of wine, third beam. And that way he would keep track of how many cups of wine he had had. Was it just to make sure he didn't get, sloppy drunk? No, it's just that he wanted to make sure that he didn't have an even number of cups. He was doing this in his home, so evidently there is concern that one should not drink in pairs even in his home. And likewise, Abaye, when he would drink 1 cup, his mother would immediately place 2 cups in his 2 hands so that he would not inadvertently drink only 1 more cup and thereby expose himself to the danger of drinking in pairs. If he had 1, his mother immediately gave him 2, so now he would end up drinking 3 cups, an odd number, which is considered safe. And similarly, when Rav Nachman Bar Yitzhak would drink 2 cups, his attendant would immediately place 1 more cup in his hand, and he would drink 1 cup. And if he would drink 1 cup, the attendant would place 2 cups in his 2 hands. And these reports indicate that one should be concerned for his safety after drinking an even number of cups, even when he remains at home. The Gemara answers, an important person is different. The demons focus their attention on him, and he must therefore be more careful than the average person. Now, I would say, whatever your feeling is about demons and demonology and evil spirits, etc., this idea that an important person needs to be more particular, especially when they're talking about alcohol, yeah, that is a good piece of wisdom right there. Anybody should be careful, but a public figure, an important person, one with responsibilities, one that the community looks to, yes, all the more that person should be careful. Ula said, 10 cups contain no element of the danger associated with pairs. Now, let's just remember for a second that we've said this before, that they always, in the ancient times, they always diluted the wine. Now, was it because the wine was so strong that when they diluted it, 3 parts water, 1 part wine, it ended up being the equivalent of the wine that we drink today in terms of alcoholic content. That's been my assumption up until now. But now I almost wonder, perhaps when they diluted it, they really diluted it, and they made it end up at 5% or 3% alcohol. And it was because they had long meals and they were kind of drinking the wine almost as water. In fact, water was itself problematic. Having potable water in the ancient world was not always such a given. Mixing it with some alcohol might have made the water a little bit more safe. And so perhaps they could drink so many cups because really the alcohol content was low. And so that would bring this idea of drinking in pairs. It makes more sense to us now when we hear that, when we hear numbers like this. Ula said 10 cups contain no element of danger. 10 cups of wine? Okay, but maybe they're all actually quite weak and they're small. It's not like these guys are not roaring drunk by any means. So Ula said 10 cups contain no element of danger associated with drinking in pairs. Ula rules here in accordance with his reasoning stated elsewhere. As Ula said, and some say it was taught in a baraisa, the sages instituted that one must drink 10 cups of wine in the house of a mourner during the meal of comfort. And if it could enter your mind that 10 cups do not contain the element of danger associated with pairs, how could the sages arise and institute something that might bring a person to a state of danger? However, 8 cups do contain the element of danger associated with pairs. And again, this suggests to me that the alcohol content of these cups must have been very low, because for sure we do not have a tradition to get drunk in the house of a mourner. A shiva, when there's a house of mourning, somebody has lost a relative and everybody comes and visits and they do services in the house and they give comfort and talk, etc. What you can count on in a Jewish house of mourning, in a shiva, is that there's a lot of food. But alcohol and people drinking and getting drunk, I've never seen it in all my life. I haven't even heard of it. It's just not really one of our customs. Okay, so the sages institute that one must drink 10 cups in the house of a mourner. And if so, how could the sages institute something that would contain the danger of drinking in pairs? So it seems like once you reach that number 10, it's like we're beyond the place where we have to worry about whether you drank in pairs or not. 10 is beyond that. So now it seems like if you drink 2, 4, 6, or 8 cups of wine, then you bring this danger upon yourself that you will attract the dangerous, malignant attention of demons or evil spirits, or as we'll see, witches and sorcerers. So Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna both say that 8 is also safe from the dangers of pairs. Why? Because the number 7 is included in 8. And the number 7 is represented by the word shalom, peace. And it combines with the previous cups for the good, but it does not combine for the bad. So we'll get to in a second, we'll say why 7 is associated with shalom. But just to get this idea that because the number 7 is considered so beneficial, we already are familiar with the number 7 in terms of the days of the week. Shabbos is represented by 7, the day of rest. It's a day of holiness. So 7 is already a very positive and holy number in Judaism. But here, it's being associated with the word shalom. We'll get to that in a second. But what they mean is because it's of such a positive value, so if you have you've drank 6 cups, okay, and then you have a 7th, all right, now you remove the danger of drinking in pairs because you had 6 cups. Now you had the 7th. If you have 1 more cup, well, now you've had 8th. You reinstill that danger. But no, because that 7th cup, it'll combine with 6 in order to remove the danger of drinking in pairs. But it will not combine with the 8th cup in order to create danger, because that 7th cup, the number 7 is only for the good. It will not act for the bad. Now, where do we get that shalom is associated with 7? So this is from the priestly blessing, right? So we have the verse in the Torah that it says, God said to Moses, or does he say to Moses or to Aaron? I mean, we read this every morning. Why am I being so stupid? Because after we say the blessings in the morning on Torah study, then the first thing we need to do is speak a little Torah. And what we do then is recite some Torah, which is the priestly blessing. And I just want to get the introductory Moshe Lemor. Say to Moses. I'm being so stupid. All right. It's from Numbers 6. All right. At any rate, God teaches the Jewish people, and God teaches Moses to teach Aaron and his descendants, who are the Kohanim, the priests, that when you bless the Jewish people, this is how you shall bless them. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord countenance you and be gracious to you. May the Lord favor you and grant you shalom, peace. Right? And that is also the way that we bless our children on Friday nights. On the seventh day, as Shabbos comes in, parents, usually the father, blesses the children. So to the boys, we say, may God make you like Ephraim and Menashe, the sons of Joseph, and sort of the first brothers in Jewish history who were at peace with each other. And to the daughters, we say, may God make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. The matriarchs, the Jewish matriarchs. And then to the boys or girls, we say to them in Hebrew, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yihunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. Here translated, the third verse there is, may the Lord turn his face toward you and grant you peace. It's a very beautiful blessing. And that last line is 7 words long. Yisa Adonai painav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. So the shalom, peace, is the 7th word. By the way, I was saying God's name as I was reading that because I'm teaching it and I'm saying it specifically from the text. Normally, when we're not actually uttering a blessing, we would substitute for God's name by saying Hashem, the name. Okay, so shalom, peace, the 7th word in that blessing, in the 3rd line of the blessing. It's how we end that blessing, but it's the 7th word in that verse. Shalom, associated only with positivity and blessings. So the number 7 will only combine with, in the case of cups of wine, the 7th cup will combine with the 6 previous cups in order to remove the danger of drinking in pairs. Now we've drunk 7, but it will not combine with the 8th cup to create 8, which would reinstill that danger. It only combines for the good. Let's get back to where we were. Here we go. Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say that even drinking 6 cups is not dangerous. Why? The reason is that the 5th cup is represented by the word vihuneka, right? So now we go back to that same blessing, and now it's the 2nd of the 3 verses when we say, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha vihunecha. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. Be gracious to you, vihuneka. Be gracious to you. Right? So the idea of blessing and that God would be gracious to you means that the number 5 also has this very positive charge, and therefore a 5th cup will combine with the previous 4 cups to mean that you drank an odd number, 5 cups, but it will not combine with the 6th cup to mean that you drank an even number and would harm you. So they said, don't worry about it if you've had 6 cups, because the 5th only combines with the others for good and not for danger, for evil. And then Abaye, where am I? And then Abaye and Rava both say that even the number 4 is not dangerous, as the first line of this blessing that the priests used to bless all of Israel and that the parents used to bless their children, the 3rd word is v'yishmerecha, right? So the first line of that blessing, may the Lord bless you and protect you. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord protect you. So that's the 3rd word in that line, right? So it's 3, 5, 7 in terms of the number of words in each line. And now that means that there's a very positive charge on the number 3 It'll combine with 2 cups to protect you from danger. Now you've had 3 cups, but it won't combine with the 4th cup to endanger you because you've drank 2 pairs, right? So that you've drank that even number. That's according to Abaye and Rava. Now, what's interesting is at this point they should mention, and that's another reason why we don't have to worry about drinking 4 cups of wine at Passover. They don't actually mention that, but they say that the 3rd cup combines for good, but not for bad. And Rava follows his standard line of reasoning in this regard, as Rava allowed the sages to leave his lecture after having drunk 4 cups and was not concerned for their safety. Although Rava bar Levi was injured on one such occasion, Rava was not concerned that the matter had been caused by his consumption of an even number of cups. As he said, the injury occurred because Rava bar Levi challenged me during the public lecture. It is improper for a student to raise difficulties against his rabbi during a public lecture, lest the rabbi be embarrassed by his inability to answer. Right? So you don't ask a rabbi tough questions when he's in a public setting. If you have a really difficult question that might stump the rabbi and he's not up for being stumped, so you ask him privately. You don't want to embarrass anybody, and you certainly don't want to embarrass a rabbi because everybody else looks to him for guidance. And if you undermine his ability publicly to provide guidance, then other people are going to lose confidence in him, and that's going to harm the whole community. Rav Yosef said, so Rav Yosef is an important Amora teaching in the Babylonian Jewish community within the Persian Empire. Rav Yosef said, Yosef the demon said to me. Okay, so Yosef the demon is this character that appears from time to time in the Talmud. And he seems to be a demon who has a friendship with some of the sages. And at least in so far as he tells the sages what's going on in the world of demons so that the sages can, transmit that valuable information to the rest of the people. So Rav Yosef says, Yosef the demon said to me, Ashmedai, the king of the demons, is appointed over all who perform actions in pairs. And a king is not called a harmful spirit. A king would not cause harm. Consequently, there is no reason to fear the harm of demons for having performed an action in pairs. So Rav Yosef says that according to what he heard from Yosef the demon, who heard it, who knows that in demon world, right, the king of the demons, Ashmedai, he himself is in charge of dealing with people who do things in pairs. And since the king is the king and he's busy ruling all the other demons, he's not going to go and inflict harm on the humans. According to Rav Yosef, we don't have to worry so much about doing things in pairs. But some say, this statement in this manner. On the contrary, he is an angry king who does what he wants. And as we have a law that a king may breach the fence of an individual in order to form a path for himself, and none may protest his action, similarly, the king of demons has full license to harm people who perform actions in pairs. Rav Papa said, Yosef the demon said to me. So now Rav Yosef interacted with Yosef the demon, and so did Rav Papa. Yosef the demon said to me, if one drinks 2 cups, we demons kill him. If he drinks 4, we do not kill him. But this person who drank 4, we harm him. There is another difference between 2 and 4. With regard to one who drinks 2, whether he did so unwittingly or intentionally, we harm him. With regard to one who drinks 4, if he does so intentionally, yes, he is harmed. If he does so unwittingly, no, he is not to be harmed. And the Gemara asks, okay, so if one forgets and it happens that he goes outside after having drunk an even number of cups, what is his solution? Presumably he remembered after he had finished drinking that he drank an even number. So now what is his solution? He's like, oh, I'm afraid I drank an even number of cups. I can't go back in and drink a 5th cup or a 7th cup, whatever. It's like it's too late. So what should this person do? And the Gemara answers, this is so colorful. The Gemara answers, he should take his right thumb in his left hand and his left thumb in his right hand. So kind of like this. right? So that both thumbs are being held by the other hand, and you make a unit out of your fists, which are interlocked with the thumbs, right? So you do this. And so this is a person who realizes that he drank an even number of cups, and now he wants to protect himself from demons. So he should seize his hands like that with the two thumbs held by the opposite hand. And then that person should say as follows. You, my thumbs, and I are three. Right? So I am one, and now with each of my thumbs, we are three. Right? So we are three. We are not two. We're not doing things in even numbers. We are three. And that is not a pair. And if this person hears a voice that says, you and I are four, meaning he's already endangered himself because he went out at night having drunk an even number of cups, so he's now vulnerable to attack by the demons. And so he's concerned about it. So now he says, me and my thumbs, we are three. We are three. We are an odd number. But then he hears a voice saying, you and I are four. That's a demon who is coming to scare him and possibly attack him. So the demon says, you and I are four. You and your thumbs are three. But now there's a demon with us, and now there's four. So if that happens, you say back to the demon, you and I are five. The demon might answer, you and I are six. And you just keep one-upping the demon and say, you and I are one more than that. And the Gemara relates that there was an incident in which someone kept counting after the demon until he reached 101. And apparently demons, although they're vicious, evil, nasty little creatures, they're not very smart, and their brains can't handle very much, because when this incident kept one-upping the demon, when they eventually reached 101, the demon burst in anger. He was so angry that he exploded, and that way we got rid of the demon. A Maimar said, the chief of witches said to me. Now, note that we're changing the subject a little bit. We've been talking about demons and evil spirits, and that drinking in pairs exposes you to danger from demons and evil spirits. That's from that spirit world. Now we're shifting gears a little bit, and we're going to be talking about witches and sorcerers. So these are humans who are practicing some kind of witchcraft, which is absolutely prohibited for a Jew to do. That is part of the written Torah. Jews may not engage in witchcraft or sorcery of any kind. So Maimar said, the chief of witches said to me, one who encounters witches should say this incantation. Now, I'm just going to read what it says here. And the note from Rav Steinsaltz says, when you talk about incantations of witches, they don't make logical sense. It's just, kind of like this is the incantation, and you say what it says here, and this is going to ward off the witch and make her powerless against you. Him or her, I guess. Could be a male witch. Okay, so what does it say here? The chief of witches said to me, one who encounters witches should say this incantation. Hot feces in torn date baskets in your mouth, witches. May your hairs fall out. Your crumbs should scatter. Your spices should scatter. The wind should carry away the fresh saffron that you hold. As long as I was shown favor and you showed me favor, I did not come here. Now that I have come here, your favor toward me has cooled, and you should find favor. That's it. That's the incantation. If you're concerned about meeting witches in a dark alley, here it is on page 110 in Tractate Pesachim. Memorize that, and that's what you say to a witch that you want to protect yourself from. The Gemara relates that in the West, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, right? The West is always Israel as opposed to the East, which is Bavel, right? The Babylonian Jewish community, as opposed to the community in Israel, which at this point is under the dominion of Rome. So the Gemara relates that in the West, they were not particular with regard to pairs. Right, so the sages that were living and teaching in the land of Israel were unconcerned about this drinking in pairs. They really were basically unconcerned about demons and evil spirits and witches and sorcerers and all of that. It was just not their concern. Rav Dimi from Nehardea was particular about pairs, even with regard to the signs on a barrel. He would not write pairs of symbols on a barrel. There was an incident in which there were pairs of symbols on a barrel and the barrel burst. And the Gemara concludes, the rule of the matter is, all who are particular about pairs, the demons are particular with him. And if one is not particular, they are not particular with him. However, one is required to be concerned about the harm that might result from purposely performing actions in pairs. Now, you would think if the general rule is if I'm not too concerned about demons, they're not even going to bother with me. So why wouldn't I just go out of my way to never be concerned about these demons? But the fact is, they're out there. It is a problem. You have to be a little bit concerned. You just don't want to obsess with this stuff. And that's where we get that rule right there. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said, with regard to 2 eggs, 2 nuts, 2 cucumbers, and another matter, there is a halacha lemoshe misinai. Right? So halachas limoshe misinai means laws that were oral laws. There were a few oral laws that were given to Moses at Mount Sinai to be transmitted through the oral tradition, and they began at Sinai. Other laws were, rabbinic decrees were sort of, interpolated and figured out by the rabbis in order to enable us to fulfill the written laws of the Torah. Certain laws, like we need the oral tradition in order to know how to fulfill the written laws. But there were also some laws that were transmitted right at Mount Sinai to Moses, and he began passing them down. And so this idea of pairs being harmful does go all the way back to the oral law given at Mount Sinai. Now, it wasn't about wine and drinking in pairs. It was about 2 eggs or 2 nuts or 2 cucumbers and another matter, right? And that's the problem. This other matter was lost. Somehow in the chain of transmission, we lost what was this 4th matter of pairs that are dangerous. The sages are uncertain what the other matter is, and therefore the sages decreed that all pairs are prohibited due to this mysterious other matter that we lost what it was actually about. Since we don't know, as a protective measure, like washing hands and wearing a mask, we don't drink or perform actions in pairs. And that's where it all comes back to. And the Gemara notes that which we said above, that the numbers 10, 8, 6, and 4 do not cause danger associated with pairs because the numbers 7, 5, and 3 protect us, right? And that's why those numbers are not so. 10 is just beyond what's necessary, what's harmful, and 8, 6, and 4 don't cause harm because 7, 5, and 3 come from the priestly blessing. And the words associated with those numbers, 3, 5, and 7, are words of complete benefit and positivity. So with regard to these numbers, 8, 10, 8, 6, and 4, that they don't cause danger when associated with pairs, we said this only with regard to harmful spirits. However, with regard to witchcraft, we are concerned, even with regard to one who performed an activity a greater number of times. So maybe the evil spirits won't be so particular with us if we're not particular with them, and we don't have to worry so much about performing actions in pairs. But when we perform actions in pairs, we do open ourselves up to the curses and spells of witches. Where am I? And this is like that incident involving a certain man who divorced his wife. She went and married a shopkeeper who sold wine in his store. Every day, the first husband would go and drink wine in that shop. His ex-wife would perform witchcraft upon him, and it would not be effective for her in her attempts to harm him because he was careful with regard to pairs. He would always drink wine in that shop, in that wine shop, but he would never drink pairs, right? He would always drink an odd number of cups of wine. One day he drank a lot, and he did not know how much he drank. Until he had drunk 16 cups, he was lucid and was careful with regard to himself to keep track of how many cups he had drunk. From here onward, he was not lucid, and he was not careful to watch himself, and she caused him to leave after having consumed a pair. In other words, He had a total number of an even number of cups. And as he walked, a certain Arab met him and noticed that he was bewitched and said to him, "It is a dead man who walks here," right? He was so bewitched, it was visible to this Arab who was walking by. And the Arab said to him, "You're bewitched and you're like a dead man walking." What did the man do? He went and hugged a palm tree for support. The palm tree dried out due to the witchcraft, and now there's two variants in the text. In some texts of this Gemara, it says, "and he burst," and in some it says, "and it burst." In other words, he was bewitched, he hugged a palm tree, and palm trees are considered dangerous in themselves. Here, the witchcraft kind of went into the tree and caused the tree to die. And then it's unclear whether he also died or whether the witchcraft went out of him and harmed the tree, but he was saved. Unclear. Rav Avira said, plates and loaves do not contain the element of danger associated with pears. The Gemara elaborates upon this point. The rule of the matter is that anything whose production was completed by people, whether a vessel or food, they do not contain the element of danger associated with pears. You could have 2 slices of cake because cake is made by people, but you shouldn't have 2 cucumbers or 2 eggs or 2 nuts. You should make sure to have an odd number. Conversely, if the object was completed by heaven, e.g. with regard to types of food, we are concerned. Now you might think, well, we've been talking about wine. Wine is completed by people. Wine is not completed by heaven. But actually, we do have a note on that. Where'd it go? Yes, since the production of wine is completed by people, why is it dangerous to drink an even number of cups of wine? The answer is that wine is produced from grapes, which are completed by heaven. In this regard, wine differs from bread, which requires numerous stages of production before it is rendered edible. The grapes are edible in themselves. The fermentation process is pretty much a natural process. Obviously, the winemakers get very, very involved. But nevertheless, wine, for the purposes of drinking in pairs, is considered like a natural product of heaven. Furthermore, a store does not contain the element of danger associated with pears. If one eats there, there's no danger, as this is not his regular place. If one changed one's mind after drinking an odd number of cups and added one more, his drinking does not contain the element of danger associated with pears. In other words, drank 5 cups, I'm done. I don't want to drink in pairs, I'm finished. Keep talking, keep having fun, hang out with your friends, and then you decide to have one more cup. Not a problem, because that's actually like a new count and a new cup, and doesn't combine with the previous one because it's like a new decision. You had, in your mind already ended drinking before. So one who changes his mind, we don't have that element of danger associated with pairs. The behavior of a guest who eats or drinks in someone else's house does not contain the element of danger associated with pairs, as his host determines how much he will eat and drink. The behavior of a woman does not contain the element of danger associated with pairs, as demons are not particular with regard to how much a woman eats or drinks. Right? So demons are only looking to attack men. Men are much more vulnerable to demonic attack than women are. That, I think, jives with this idea that we often encounter that women are naturally at a higher level of holiness and therefore have an extra measure of protection. However, if she is a prominent woman in the community, somebody who's well known, an important person, then again, like any important person, man or woman, can attract the attention and the evil eye of these spirits. And so a prominent woman should be concerned like a prominent man should be concerned. Rav Chinana, the son of Rabbi Yehoshua, said, asparagus, a wine-based drink with added spices that people would regularly consume in the morning for health purposes, combines with the number of cups of wine one has already consumed for the good to raise the total to an odd number, but it does not combine for the bad to bring the sum to an even number. Since it's a medicine that is wine-based, it can combine with other cups of wine to give you an odd number, but it won't combine with other cups of wine if you finish with an even number and you're in danger. Ravina said in the name of Rava, and now I'm almost done, so if you have questions, get them in there. Ravina said in the name of Rava, if one is in doubt as to whether he has drunk in pairs, he should be stringent and drink another cup. And some say that one who is uncertain with regard to pairs should be lenient and not drink an additional cup, lest the additional cup be the even number. Rav Yosef said, 2 cups of wine and 1 cup of beer do not combine. That's actually a new subject. So this idea, well, if you're not sure how many you had, what should you do? Right? So the stringent opinion is have one more, because what you're seeking to do is protect yourself. Therefore, that is a cup that is, has this positive charge. And therefore, if it brings you to an odd number, it protects you. If it actually brought you to an even number, you're not sure what the total number was, but if that extra cup brings you to an even number, since you drank it to protect yourself, it won't combine for harm. On the other hand, some people say, no. If you're not sure how many you've had, don't drink an additional cup, because if you do drink an additional cup, you show that you are particular when it comes to this danger of being harmed by demons. And as we've seen, those who are particular with the danger of demons are more likely to be attacked by demons. If you're not sure, better just leave it alone and move on and not be so particular about it. Now, Rav Yosef says that 2 cups of wine and 1 cup of beer do not combine. The wine is considered more chashava, more significant, more important than beer. So if you have 2 cups of wine, now you've had a pair. If you add a glass of beer, it's not going to help you because the beer doesn't amount to, it's not on the equivalent level with the wine. However, if you had two glasses of beer, so now you have this problem that you had a pair of glasses of beer, but now you want to add a cup of wine, that's all that's available, it will combine with the 2 beers to equal 3 drinks. 1 wine and 2 beers is not like 3 drinks, but 1 wine and 2 beers is like 3 drinks of the beer, right? So that way it could save you and get you to an odd number. Rav Nachman said that Rav said, if one drinks 2 cups before the table is brought and the meal begins and 1 cup over the table, they do combine. The person is not considered to have drunk a pair of cups. However, if one drinks 1 cup before the table is brought and 2 cups over the table, they do not combine. The 2 cups he drank during the meal are considered a pair. And Rav Misharshia strongly objects to this ruling. Is that to say that we need to resolve the problem of pairs with regard to the table? Is the presence of the table the decisive factor here? We need to resolve the problem with regard to the person. And with regard to the person, it is resolved. He began drinking before the table was brought, and he has consumed an odd number of cups. What difference does it make whether the table was there or not? In this same sitting, he had 3 cups. He's safe. Rather, Rav Misharshia said, everyone agrees that if one drank 2 cups over the table during the meal and 1 after the table has been removed when we assume that the meal ended, then they do not combine. The 2 that he had during the meal, that was an even number. He has that problem. Adding an extra cup later after the meal is over doesn't get him to a 3rd cup. He has this problem. And this is like the incident involving Rabba bar Nachmani, in which someone drank in pairs and was harmed. And Rabba instructed them to return the table so that the man could drink an additional cup over the table. Since they returned the table, they strongly indicated that it's part of the same meal. And this shows that the additional cup counts only if the drinker returns to the table or if the table is returned to the drinker. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. Let us go to your comments and questions. Okay, Lucy. Too much emphasis upon evil spirits, either to seek them or to avoid them, is destabilizing psychologically, hence makes the person vulnerable to dangerous spiritual influences, right? And it's exactly the lesson that the sages are teaching us. These things are out there. They can be harmful. We should be aware of them. We should take sensible precautions and not obsess with this. And that's generally a good psychological approach to this problem, of evil in the world. Take sensible precautions. Don't obsess with it. I agree with you, Lucy. Lynn, this concern of pairs is lessened by region, eras, and personal beliefs. Is it as good as disregarded in modern Jewry? I mean, yeah, I think it probably is. I don't know if it should be completely disregarded by modern Jews. I think that where we are is that, listen, modern Jews, 90% of the Jews in the world, tragically, are disconnected from Judaism almost altogether. So, this is just one more among the thousands of teachings that tragically most modern Jews are unaware of. Should we have some sense of this stuff? I think it's just good to know. I think maybe one of the most important lessons that we can take from these kind of studies, and we don't talk about this stuff that often. We don't run into it that often in the Talmud. So much more often we're just talking about halacha or really straightforward practical concerns, or much more, ideological, theological, philosophical concerns. But now that we're here and talking about evil spirits, I think it is worth being humble and say, we don't know everything, and to say that unless science brings proof that something exists, it doesn't exist, that's silly. That's just silly. Because there's many things in the world that prior to science reaching a place where they were able to measure these things, science was not able to measure or prove their existence, and yet they were there. Right? Let's not forget, there was a time when the majority of humans thought the earth was flat. And obviously, eventually, they caught up and learned. So the fact that science and rational whatever, doesn't prove certain things exist doesn't mean that they don't. And the fact that there's so much tradition, not just in Judaism, but in every culture, about this kind of, spiritual realm where there are both forces of good and evil, I think it tells us that we should be a little bit humble and step carefully and, just be cautious with the way that we handle ourselves and never assume that we're so righteous that we could never be tempted and sin, nor should we ever assume that we're so dissolute and have made so many mistakes in our lives that we can't atone and bring ourselves up to a much higher spiritual level. And when we do, obviously we should always look to God for help. In all these matters, pray to God for assistance, pray to God for safety, pray to God for strength, etc. And that's going to be the surest and safest and most positive way to handle these kinds of fears. Cling to the Holy One. Carolyn, does this concept of even numbers being at issue apply to other things like twins who enter the world as a pair? It doesn't seem so. There doesn't seem to be any kind of a charge like that. It's more about actions that we can choose to do or not do. Hey, let's not forget, the normal marriage throughout history was, two people, man and woman, to produce children. It's not like them marrying has any kind of a negative charge. On the contrary, the wedding is just like the most joyous, celebrated, but positive thing. So this idea of pairs, really it has to do with, drinking and eating. That's what we've been encountering. It's about drinking and eating. Now, this idea that because I want to make sure that I don't drink an even number of cups, so I'm going to count the number of cups I drink, well, a nice effect of that is I'm not going to lose track of how much I drank. I'm going to know how much I drank, and I'm so much less likely to, drink too much and lose track and, get myself in trouble in that way. So there's definitely a positive aspect to it there as well. Elvis, what would the rationalist Maimonides say about these superstitions about demons? I don't know. I don't have a note here from Rav Steinsaltz. I seem to recall when I looked up a little bit about this in the over here in Jewish Virtual Library. I was reading up on this subject, and I remember seeing something about Maimonides, and I believe you're right. I think Maimonides is not He doesn't put too much stress on this stuff, but I want to make sure that I saw that. Right, the Talmudic commentators and codifiers accepted the belief in demons. Maimonides alone opposed it. So yes, you're right. Maimonides does not put much stock in all of this stuff, but he's alone among all the commentators on the Talmud, including Rashi, in this regard. Yosef, obviously the difficulty with pairs does not apply to studying with a Havrusa, as that is a product of heaven, right? Also, will these pages be discussing the bedtime Shema and demonology? I haven't read them that carefully going forward. We saw last night that the bedtime Shema is to help us ward off the demons. It's not just the Shema. The Shema we have to say every night, but it's the passages which follow the Shema, as I mentioned yesterday, including Psalm 91. If you ever feel like, there's just wickedness and evil around you and you feel like maybe it's beyond human, recite Psalm 91. That is kind of invoking God's aid to ward off evil forces. Whenever you feel beset by evil, recite Psalm 91. And that's one of these passages that we say at night to kind of ward off any kind of attacks that might come at us when we're vulnerable because we're asleep. And finally, Jennifer says, what about a half cup or even just a sip? Since it is not a full cup, can it raise a possible pair but not create a pair? A very Talmudic question, Jennifer. Very Talmudic. I don't know. They haven't addressed this idea of just drinking partial cups. Does it mean when you drink 2 cups, it means that you drank 2 whole cups? What if you only drank a little part of that second cup? How much of it do you have to drink before it counts as the second cup? I don't know the answer, but it's a very good and sage-like question. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got for us this evening. With God's help, tomorrow, Friday, our regular Friday time, noon Pacific, we'll continue with page 111 here in Tractate Pesachim, the 4th volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover. Let's not forget that what we're really talking about is the laws of Passover, and this digression was all based on the idea that we drink 4 cups of wine, which is certainly safe to do at the Passover Seder. Have a good night.